The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. Welcome to a Tuesday edition. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing okay. We'll get our starting five shout-outs here shortly in the StreamYard. Like and subscribe to Hail Varsity YouTube. Also follow on Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Can find Elijah on Twitter at Herbal Essence, at Schmidt_radio for me. Couple of new names, possibly in that quarterback room for Nebraska for 2024. We will explain and spend some time with Mitch Sherman. An extended sit-down with Mitch from The Athletic at Mitch Sherman on Twitter is where you follow him. His Locked On podcast is great stuff as always. And we'll talk with Mitch here in about 15 minutes or so. The return of Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntsy is back. And we'll talk some Big Red with Bruntsy in the 5 o'clock hour. Then Brandon Kinnie, longtime Husker wideout, doing some great work with Millard North. Get his reaction to Pierce Mooberry's commitment and all the good things you have BK doing with Alliance Sports Trading. So we'll talk to BK about Nebraska's receiver room, that mesh and mesh of young and old with some of the transfers with NAIA and Jamal Banks and what that receiver room could be for Nebraska in 2024. 489-1240. Number to get in, 489-1240 or 800-825-5865. Toll free for you, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Elijah, did you make it through your movie marathon? How many buckets of popcorn did you handle last night? Lord of the Rings last night?
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, it was The Return of the King in theaters. Nothing short of a religious experience to get that surround sound with the great score. It was a fantastic experience. You asked about the buckets of popcorn. 4 hours long. I don't think, it was me and my roommate who ended up going. I don't think we ended up making it through the second bucket of large popcorn, but we got damn close. So it was an impressive popcorn eating performance. Did I feel good the rest of the night or this morning? No, not one bit. Do I feel great right now? Still also no, but it was extremely worth it to be able to get that in-theater experience for Return of the Kings. That was awesome. Now that that's done, it's on to today. Setting up and making sure my Cornhusker State Games basketball team roster is in order. We're getting mini camp ready to go. We're getting some dates scheduled. I've been designated as the coach as well as the GM, so I'm thinking...
They don't want you playing, do they?
Well, I'm thinking that the triangle offense is probably what we're going to have to roll with, so I'm getting some required reading from Phil Jackson for the gentleman, so it's kept me busy today. It's Lord of the Rings is now in the past, and it's on to Cornhusker State Games. We're going to go win ourselves a gold medal.
You and Phil and... Johnny, was it Johnny Red Fox or something? Anywho, the guy who created the long-time assistant to the Bulls was the father. I think he coached at K-State of the triangle offense. And it worked well for Shaq and Kobe. It worked well for Michael and Scotty and Dennis Rodman. And do you have the players, Elijah, to execute this? Or is it an uphill climb?
It's going to be an uphill climb. I don't necessarily think we have a ball handler, which is... We have a couple people who think they're ball handlers, but they aren't. So we're still in the process of trying to find ourselves our point guard. We have some really, really good 3 and 4 types, some matchup nightmare type guys who I think can shoot, can drive well. Do I trust them to run an offense? No. But we'll get there, and that's part of the hopeful mini camp that we're trying to get scheduled right now.
Well, I am going to make sure I find the appropriate shout-out.
Dave, do you want to come run score for us? We need to provide a scorekeeper for every single game. You don't want to come. You could.
Tex Winter. I screwed that up. Red Kerr was the color guy for the Bulls broadcast. Tex Winter was who I was thinking, longtime assistant for Phil and at K-State. So leave it to me. Tiger Shark Diver is in. Elijah is in talks about the new head coaching job with the Lakers. I don't think you would turn down $11.5 million. I wouldn't let you turn down $11.5 million. Let's get to
I'm not sure I want to coach LeBron. Well, LeBron would do the coaching.
Maybe he takes off and goes to New York.
I just got to stand on the bench and cheer, I think.
Yeah, just wear a nice quarter zip and some stretchy pants and some dunks, and you're good.
And make sure to clean off the whiteboard for LeBron during timeouts.
Well, Coach, LeBron, what do you want to run? So the other Dave is in first. Jimmy, good to have you, Jimmy. He says hello to his nephew, Crazy Spider. KG is in third, the kinder, gentler version. You have Coach Brandon in. Red Knight 79. Good to have you, Red Knight. He checks in at number 5. Patrick is here. Jeff is in. Elijah. It's all right. Better late than never. It's all good. Good to have Elijah and Cliff in from Florida. Good to have you, Cliff. Ryan, Tiger Shark Diver. And then part of the Boulder Peace Treaty, Jeff Snitley is in. He says, I've been slacking lately, working, but I'm here. So good to have all of you in. Anonymous, good to have you, man. Wants to talk elephants. Speaking of elephants, after the 95 Orange Bowl, on a dark street, I smelled something really bad. The guy in front of me stepped right into a huge pile of what the elephant left at halftime. I remember that halftime.
They had elephants at halftime?
They had a halftime show of the Orange Bowl, of the 95 Orange Bowl, the game against Miami. And they were working out. And Costas did the pregame and the halftime and the postgame, right? And Collinsworth was on color. And you have Osborne saying, all right, what if one of these dudes relieves himself on the field? How do you get that out of the way? But nothing like that happened. But there was some concern, some sort of elephant/circus show, I believe, at halftime. The other story we got at Big Ten Media Days, this was quite disrespectful, but it was from Dave Wannstedt, the mustache. Wannstedt was a defensive coordinator for all those Miami teams before he went to the NFL. And Nebraska was just getting crushed. And I think this might have been the 88 Orange Bowl or the 89 Orange Bowl 88 season. And Nebraska, I think, got beat 23-3. Great Miami team. And long story short, Wannstedt goes down. He was telling this on the air probably 5, 6, 7 years ago at Media Days. And he's like, went down there at halftime and there was nothing for us to really tweak or do. We had the option snuffed out. And Nebraska was in a whole world of trouble. And they were against that Miami team that split a title. This might have been 91. And Wannstedt's like, yeah, we went down and watched the Supremes. We did zero prep for the second half against Nebraska. And ended up winning 23-3. Nebraska's D played well enough that day, but just a lot of field goals and a couple of touchdowns, and Nebraska got their last laugh with the infamous elephant halftime show, Anonymous.
So this is a complete aside, but similar. Do you remember the SMU horse leaving a dookie at midfield during their game this past year?
I do not.
It like after a touchdown, ran on the field, that they do in celebration, and right. As it's running, it lifted up its tail and left a dookie right in the middle of the field.
Did it just drop a bomb?
Yeah, it did.
Live mascots
across about 15 yards.
Oh no, one of those.
Well, not like it was solid still, but it was just a lot.
No, but when horses go,
yeah, it's like a lot of little apples.
Plop, plop,
plop. Yeah.
We got our show title. Plop, 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 plop. There we go. So thanks for tuning in. Send some emails in if you like.
Thanks for bearing with us through the talk of
live mascots.
Of animals. What would you want to call it?
Not when animals attack, but when halftime shows go wrong.
When the animals fertilize the field. If you've stuck with us through this conversation, we respect you. You're a true fan.
Turf. But excited to check in with Brandon Kinnie and Mitch Sherman and Michael Bruntz. So Nebraska football, they had a postgraduate camp yesterday. That was for high school grads. That was for transfers. That was for JUCOs. And really good story by Mitch. Couple of names to keep an eye on. No offers yet. But Nebraska and Coach Rhule thinking ahead. Jalyn Gramstad is the reigning NAIA Player of the Year. Really talented quarterback from northwestern Iowa, Orange City, Iowa, where he hails from, and he played really good college football at the NAIA level, 2022-2024 championships. During his time at quarterback, 50-6. The guy has rushed for quite a few yards. He's thrown for over 6,000 yards during his tenure there, 60 touchdowns in 3 years. And this is a nice option. But above all, Elijah, the guy's an Iowa kid that's a big-time Nebraska fan. So this opportunity, it sounds like he signed up online, drove in for the camp yesterday, and threw the ball pretty well. You also have Bryce Conover. He's a 20-year-old JUCO quarterback from Dodge City, CC. And the goal here to provide some depth and in getting a guy that can sling the football around if Nebraska does go this route. Ideally, you're going to have your 5-star win the job. And your 5-star is going to be fine. Your 5-star is going to be healthy. Great story from Brandon Vogel today in his Counter Read article on chaos rate and pressure on the Nebraska quarterback last season with the offensive line. We'll dive into some offensive line thoughts here in a moment as well. But with Nebraska, ideally, Dylan's your guy. Dylan's healthy. Dylan's protected. You have a really good freshman season from him. 2, you have Harburg, who's made some strides and can be a guy you want at quarterback. But where else could Harburg thrive?
The question, I think, with Harburg is where is he most valuable?
Sure. Is he valuable on the sideline in case Dylan goes down because you're one play away? Or is he valuable with his athleticism, his explosiveness as an H-back, a pass catcher, a guy that can carry the football, that Taysom Hill role? He can also drop back behind center in the red zone, presumably. But get him the football in space and let him use his athleticism and have the ability to redshirt, get him in if you're winning games, Danny Caitlin, but get him watered and get him developed and spend a year of grooming and growing Caitlin while you have a guy in Rhule that can keep the job, win the job, and stay healthy in the job. You could turn to a guy like Gramstad here as somebody that can go win you a ball game or not screw up the offense and still have Harburg as an option. And if the stage is too big for whatever quarterback you bring in that wants to just be part of it, wants to live the Nebraska dream, that's ideal. That's something that you're not fighting when it comes to keeping quarterbacks. You're getting a guy that wants to be a part of it, and whatever role he can help service, so be it.
And the one, I think, concern that's out there from my outside perspective, I wasn't at the camp, not the tallest quarterback you'll ever run into, but the production's there, and I think the production makes up for some of the physical attributes that may not be up to snuff, if you will. I mean, you watch his film, and I checked out...
You want 6'2", 6'4", you're dealing with 5'11", 6 foot.
Yes. And I went and checked out the film. He has ways around it, at least on the NAIA level, where, I mean, they love to run... at least 2 seasons ago, they loved to run that quarterback power with him, where you get him moving a little bit, keep the defense guessing, and then whenever you roll the pocket a little bit, get him away from the big offensive lineman, he's able to find seams downfield. A really good pocket presence, one of those guys that seems calm in the pocket.
Does he remind you of anybody?
Finds the window. Not in particular.
No Russell comp?
No, he doesn't have the same arm talent that Russell Wilson has. That's no discredit to him, and he's playing at a different level as well, so it's kind of hard to get a true feel for how a guy like this is going to perform. But the reports out of camp on Monday were that he had a good-looking football. The Husker coaches were impressed with him. And I think the biggest thing that you can't deny is production and wins. At the NAIA level, yeah, he had a really talented team around him, but an NAIA title and an NAIA runner-up in consecutive years speaks for itself. 6,000-plus passing yards over 3 years as a starter. You can't deny that kind of stuff. So you can look at the measurables all you want and say, I'm not sure if this guy's a Big Ten quarterback. But I look at the production and what he's already done, and I say, hey, if you need a solid backup quarterback that you can turn to that can probably pick up the offense, and considering his Husker ties as a childhood Husker fan, a guy that's going to probably care and put in more work than somebody else who is going to come in and sit and be your backup, it feels like a good potential situation for Jalyn and for Nebraska that, you know what, you get yourself a backup quarterback that takes some pressure off of Kalen. God forbid Dylan Rhule goes down, where now you don't have to burn your Kalen red shirt. You get another year of development for him and his year of separation in terms of eligibility between Dylan and Kalen, which is big. And when you look 3-4 years down the road from now, and it also gives you that flexibility. You talked about the value of Haarberg being on the field. One other piece to that I'd like to add is if you can get Haarberg on the field in other ways and not necessarily worry about his health, which that sounds harsh.
Make him a football player versus, well, we got to be careful in case our starter goes down.
Allow him to be a football player is another added piece of value you have with Haarberg is that panic nature you can give a defense whenever Haarberg runs out into the field, and you have to ask yourself, is he come on the field to use his arm, to use his legs? How is he going to be involved? Because you do know he has that quarterbacking experience at the Big Ten level that can cause a wrinkle in what an offense wants to do, and I guess put pressure on a defense in terms of before the play, you have to be worried, where's Haarberg at? What's Haarberg doing here? And that's just an added piece of value I think you can get with Haarberg, having him on the field. And I don't know, it just makes too much sense for me for Nebraska to say no to this guy if he wants to come.
No, you want to be able to use Haarberg, period. He's shown the ability to do a lot of things for you. Anthony Sargent weighs in when we focus on the elephants. Says the elephant in the room, how about Husker special teams? Montana Husker fans like, great question. There's clamoring for a place kicker. The Nebraska fans are queasy about the kicking part. We'll talk with Mitch Sherman next from The Athletic. Great to be with you on a Tuesday. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Let's check in with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter, the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch, how's this June treating you as we're flying through this month already? Good to spend time.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys. It's been a good June so far. Let's hope it continues.
So you've seen a lot of college baseball. Where does the Clemson-Florida drama rank for you as far as wild games from this past weekend?
Yeah, that was up there. I mean, just the specific play with Cam Cannarella's catch in the 10th inning. I mean, when your season's on the line and that ball falls and it's the season's over and you're playing at home, you've just hit the 3-run homer to take the game to extra innings, and he made that catch. I mean, I was kind of invested in Clemson and Cannarella in particular right at that moment, and started to then root for Clemson to win that game and then win the next day, so we would get to see him in Omaha and talk about that and see what he had to do next. But it was not to be. Florida continued its role that started against Nebraska right on through the postseason, and the Gators will be coming back to Omaha trying to win one more game than they got last year. One win short of a national championship last year, and despite the 28-27 record, they're right back in the College World Series. But yeah, that extra inning game, and what did it go? 13 innings
13.
In Clemson. Yeah, that was a special game. You know, every year I feel like there's one of those in the regionals or the super regionals that is extremely memorable. And that was definitely it. There were others. North Carolina played dramatic games all through the postseason so far, so I'm looking forward to seeing the Tar Heels this weekend. But that Clemson Florida finish was fantastic.
Mitch, among the 8 teams that are going to be in Omaha beginning this weekend, any teams that have a soft spot in Mitch Sherman's heart? Do you have a rooting interest here?
Maybe a little bit with Kentucky because it's the first time for the Cats. Kentucky is the only SEC program not to make it to Omaha, and that's going to change, or it has changed. Officially, it's going to change on the weekend. I back in 2017 when Nick Mingione, the coach at Kentucky, was in his first year, and Kentucky was in position to host a super regional, and then stumbled a bit in the conference tournament, I believe, or in the last series of the regular season. Didn't get to host a super, but had a regional at home, and then lost to Louisville in the super regional. It looked then like it was just a very short period. It was going to be a short period of time before Kentucky made it through and got to Omaha, made it one step farther. And I wrote about Mingione and talked to him at that time and some of their players in an article that I did when I was working at ESPN 7 years ago. And here we are. It's been a 7-year wait. Thought it might be 1 or 2 years before Kentucky broke through, and instead it was 7. And he went through ups and downs and probably came close to losing his job because of the lack of success in the postseason. But Kentucky made it through, and so I want to see them, and I'm interested to see if they can stick around a little bit. It's tough always for a program that it's in its first trip to the College World Series, no matter how deep you are and how strong your team is. If you've never experienced that environment, then it's difficult. So especially against a field like this where just about every other program has been to, well, every other program, of course, has been to Omaha, but most of them have done it very recently.
Mitch, I know it's been a while back, but, Arkansas was number 1 for quite a time this year, and Coach Van Horn's fielded incredible teams. They didn't make it out of the regional. And what's your reaction to Arkansas's regular seasons, but just issues when it comes to, even when they do get to Omaha, they've just seemed snake bit. Do you think Dave will ever get one?
Well, I'm beginning to wonder. He continues to put great teams on the field, and it's not like the quality of baseball or the level of player at Arkansas has dropped off. But the SEC is only going to get more difficult with Texas coming in and Oklahoma coming in. 2 more national level programs that are in the postseason every year. And it's harder. You hear John Cook talk about this in volleyball season about how it's more difficult to win the Big Ten than it is to win the national championship. Now, I think he said that before Nebraska ran into Texas in the Final Four this year. But the same thing. It's the same thing in the SEC in baseball. So you've got to get out of the conference, and you've got to survive the conference and still be in a position to play your best baseball in June. He's not young anymore, Dave Van Horn. He can clearly still recruit and put a team together, but we think about those years at Nebraska, and it was a quarter century ago. So he was in a different place, of course, in his career at that time. And I think they're going to continue to be good, but there are younger coaches who are taking the game to the next level, and we'll see. I don't imagine there's all that many years left for Dave Van Horn as a coach to get it taken care of. The year that they should have had it, where you had the dropped foul ball against Oregon State that would have won the championship, and then Oregon State rallied and won it the next day. I feel like it hasn't been the same for the Razorbacks since that moment.
It's Mitch Sherman with us here on Hail Varsity Radio talking some college baseball. And Mitch, to bring this back to Husker baseball briefly, as you look at this strengthening SEC, they're already the best conference in the country. They're going to add Texas. They're going to add Oklahoma. They're going to get even better. How do you think having a super conference such as the SEC affects the Big Ten and specifically Husker baseball?
Well, I heard Will Bull late in the year talk about parity in college baseball, and there's a question that I asked him about the inconsistency that Nebraska had shown and some of the frustration that I think Nebraska fans felt around the Huskers' inability to put together a winning streak and, give themselves a shot to host a regional. And this was coming off of that loss against North Dakota State and then the Friday night of the Indiana game. But, Nebraska had this ability to just continue to kind of avoid losing streaks. You couldn't put together a winning streak, but they also were avoiding losing streaks, and that's why they ended up with a 2 seed and just got a bad draw, having to face Florida a couple of times in Stillwater. But Will said that there's the reason that it's like that, and the reason that you see Texas and LSU and TCU and programs like that, and even Florida that struggled this year with consistency, is because there's more parity than ever in the sport. And then you look at the College World Series, and it's like, okay, there's 4 teams from the SEC and there's 4 from the ACC. Like, what are you talking about, parity? And I think what it is he's right. there's parity in the ACC and the SEC. Like those teams, there's more equality, and there's more teams competing for the same trophy in those two conferences. And then there's a different kind of parity in the rest of college baseball. Like it's two different levels. There's the level at the top where they beat each other up, and they're all very close to being equal with each other. There's not necessarily a dominant program among those two leagues, but that's it. Then there's like level B of the sport, and there's a lot of parity among the Big Ten and other conferences. So it's not a good thing if you're not in the SEC or the ACC, and I think it's indicative. It's a preview of what's coming in college football, because there's two conferences that are above all. They're going to be two conferences, if they're not already are, that are above all of the others in the Big Ten and the SEC. But in as far as what it means for Nebraska baseball, it's just more difficult. I mean, to break through, you're going to have to go do it most likely on the road, one if not two weekends at the home parks of those programs that are on a different level right now.
Mitch, going to switch to Nebraska football. Saw your story in the reports. You had the postgraduate camp for Nebraska as a handful of quarterbacks came to work out for Coach Rhule and Glenn Thomas. Jalyn Gramstad at a rating NAIA Player of the Year. You also have Bryce Conover, JUCO from Dodge City. And Rhule has been pretty upfront about what they might do at quarterback, and if they add somebody, what would this quarterback's role be, and what would the possible domino effects be with that quarterback room?
Well, if it's one of these two guys, then I think it looks on the surface to be like a nice fit. And I got the chance to talk to both Jalyn and Bryce this morning, and they're both kind of on pins and needles right now. Like they went through the camp, and certainly in the case of Jalyn Gramstad, it was a total surprise that he was there. Like he signed up on Saturday night and just got in his car and drove to Lincoln on Monday morning and walked in, and it's like, hey, what position do you play? I'm a quarterback. And it's like, this guy threw for 6,000 yards the last 3 years. Yeah, it's the NAIA level, but I had no idea who he was, and I was there and I was watching, and I kept nudging Max Olson, my coworker, who was next to me, and he's on his phone like trying to research some defensive lineman or a defensive back who was there that he wanted info on, and I'm like, look at this guy throwing the ball. I mean, yeah, he's little, but there's something about his arm, and that was Gramstad. I had no idea who I was watching, but could tell that he was talented. And, the role that he would play if he comes, and the same thing with Conover, who's much less accomplished at the college level, but is a bigger guy and has played JUCO ball in Division II. He redshirted at Western Colorado. The role that either of those guys would play is just to come in and provide depth. And, you're not going to upset the apple cart. It's not going to be like, oh, now Dylan Raiola's, mad because you brought somebody in who could unseat him. No, it's a safety net. And I think it would allow let's just say they get Gramstad. I think it would. He's 22 years old. He's been through certainly nothing like you would see in the Big Ten, but he's played in state championship games. He's played in NAIA championship games, and he would allow. He would be like a calming presence. I think a set of eyes that would help at that position. And I think if you had to put him in the game because like Dylan turned his ankle or something, that'd be okay. And then you could do things with Heinrich Harburg where he didn't have to always be like one play away, and he could spend some time in practices and in film sessions and in meetings where he was adding to the offense in a different way. And then you could really use him as a weapon. And in addition to that, I think it would just the added depth would allow you to be in a good spot where Danny Kaelin doesn't play in more than 4 games. And then he can continue to be someone who develops in the program and takes a redshirt year. So that's a pretty significant addition for somebody who's probably not going to start a game in what would be 1 year of eligibility if it's Gramstad.
More with Mitch Sherman on Gramstad, Nebraska's quarterback room, and some summer thoughts on the recruiting world. Mitch Sherman continues with us from The Athletic on Hail Varsity.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
It's Mitch Sherman with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, discussing a little bit the postgraduate camp that Nebraska held on Monday. Jalyn Gramstad. And Mitch, whenever you look at Jalyn, what I think is really interesting is he's a Husker fan at heart. That's why he comes to the camp. Like, you go through his Twitter page, a lot of Husker basketball highlights, a lot of Husker football highlights that has been retweeted on there by him. Like, he's a Husker fan through and through. And I think that's really interesting because we've heard it a lot of times. Like, sometimes at Nebraska, it's more important to have those guys that play for the name on the front of the jersey as opposed to the name on the back of the jersey.
Oh yeah, for sure. And and especially if you're in this kind of a position where you're being asked to come in and be a supporting piece. I mean, maybe the chips fall where this guy's out there starting against Ohio State. You never know. I mean, players get injured, stuff happens.
Don't put that out there.
that would not be the plan. That wouldn't be the blueprint in bringing him in. I can promise you that. But yeah, especially for somebody where the plan is to be a supporting piece, you want them to be invested in your program. You don't want to have to teach them that, especially somebody who's 22 years old. And if you're retweeting Husker basketball content as a kid from Iowa, then you're not faking it. Then that's legit. You've got it in your heart for sure. So I enjoyed talking to him. He was on a mower this morning on the golf course up in Orange City, Iowa, where he has a summer job. Seems like a great kid, one of 5 siblings, and as you said, Elijah grew up a Nebraska fan. So, I don't want to say like, hey, they're going to take him. They're not going to look at Bryce Conover. They toured both of those guys along with one of Conover's teammates, a receiver, through the facilities yesterday after the camp. But, Gramstad seems like, just on the surface, a really interesting story, and somebody that you would just never think in a million years is going to end up just walking into that camp. That's kind of what happened last year with James Williams, the D lineman from Iowa Central, who they didn't know anything about. And he comes in, and then, 5 months later, he's out there getting sacks in Big Ten games. So after busting off the scout team. So yeah, it's an intriguing story. It's fun. This is the kind of reason why it's great to follow the camps that happen in Lincoln in June. And Matt Rhule and his staff give these kind of players an opportunity that you just don't see at very many Power 5 programs around the country.
Mitch, as we discuss this post-grad camp, do you see Nebraska targeting any sort of post-grad immediate eligibility defensive back in the wake of Ethan Nation's departure?
Well, I think if somebody were to show up that they think could walk in and be a fit at corner and help add depth, and someone who's better than like the options that they have on their roster, then absolutely, there'd be a scholarship for that player, or NIL for that player. I think they kind of thought maybe they had something yesterday. There was a defensive back from Ball State who's in the portal, who was there and who put up kind of a crazy broad jump number right at the beginning of the camp, and I don't know how it materialized the rest of the way, but it wasn't like he didn't walk out of there with an offer. So maybe he's a really good broad jumper, and the rest of the tools weren't there. I don't know. I looked at him, and he looked the part. Like he was in great shape. But I don't know what he ran, and what kind of a vibe they got from him. If that had panned out, then yeah, you're happy to add a DB. But I think being a little thin at corner, in the wake of Ethan Nation's departure, and Ethan Nation didn't necessarily come out of the spring like as a top 2 on the depth chart guy, but it's just a depth and experience issue. He's somebody who played in 7 games last year, and you've got Tommy Hill with experience at corner, and that's it right now. So you would like to have the experience. They're going to look at Jeremiah Charles. You have Bly Hill, who's going to be out for certainly some of camp, and maybe even into the season. So hard to you're not gonna be able to count on him at the beginning of the year. And he was the guy that emerged in the spring, so he's on the sideline. Nation's gone. Jeremiah Charles, great athlete, but no experience. Mario Buford's a true freshman. A couple of the true freshmen they brought in last year haven't necessarily materialized as corners who are ready to play. It's going to be Malcolm Hartzog probably, man in that spot. They wanted him to be able to be at safety. Marquise Buford played a little corner early in his career. Maybe he's somebody who can walk back into that position. He has a ton of experience, and he's a leader. But you want him at the safety spot. So possibly a wide receiver moves over. They tinkered with Jaden Doss playing some DB in the spring. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if on the first day of preseason camp, he's out there at corner, or maybe something will come up here in this camp setting. But yesterday was kind of the day. Like that was the post grad camp, the post high school grad camp. Players who were immediately eligible. That was the day for them to come in, and I don't believe at this point they found someone that they felt like could help them right away at corner.
Mitch, about a minute, we'll get you out. Thanks again for making time. Just overall thoughts on Nebraska's recruiting. What do you think so far, Rhule and company, this June?
Yeah, well, it's been a busy month for sure. You had David Hufkin last week, the German offensive lineman who came out of nowhere, had been in the United States for a few days, and then here he is coming to Nebraska, and he's a 24 guy, so recruiting, yes, but it's also just like adding immediately to the roster. Although he's not going to be someone who's ready to walk on the field and play for a while. Even at age 22, I mean, he has a ton of growth that he needs to do, and as far as just learning the game and building up his body, which I think will happen fast. Again, because he's 22, but he's like 260 pounds, so there's some time needed there. With the 25 class, I mean, Mooberry, they add to Millard North, the Nebraska legacy, son of Brandon Mooberry, the ex-Husker. That's nice to get that done. I think the feeling was that he was going to join the class at some point. It was inevitable, so you want to get that done in June, so then you can start building momentum through June. That's the way it went last year. A little bit of a slow start last year to the month of June, and then it really just picked up once the official visits kicked in, and that's this weekend, the 14th, the weekend of the 14th, which is Friday, and then the weekend of the 21st are the two big weekends for official visits. And, I think you'll see multiple commits for the 25 class out of both of those weekends. And if they're at like 9 right now on the 25 class, you could see it up over 15 by the 4th of July. And I think that's where they want to be. A huge piece, obviously, is Christian Jones. Another huge piece is Chase Lofton. I'm talking about the linebacker from Omaha West Side, Jones, and tight end from Millard South. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of out-of-state pieces they want to add, but generally, just like the way the dominoes fall, you take care of those in-state guys. And I think they're in good position for sure with Jones. He's a national level recruit, but he's another guy whose dad played at Nebraska, like Mooberry, and it's not from anything that he said when I've talked to him, or even really that I've read in comments that have been he's made when he's talked to other people about the situation. I think he's very much focused on West Side and winning another state championship. But my gut says that Nebraska will land Christian Jones. I would be shocked if that one doesn't go that direction. So we'll see. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. But if they do, that's a giant piece, and I think one that could have a carryover effect and just kind of getting things rolling, especially on the defensive side.
Mitch, take care. We'll check in again. Thanks for the time.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Good stuff from Mitch Sherman, the Athletic, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. And we'll see what we think of Chase Lofton. And had a great visit to Florida State. That's a big-time target for Nebraska tight end.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, we'll tell you to head to the podcast if you're just catching us. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. The segments you want or the entire show with Hail Varsity Radio. Like and subscribe. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. We appreciate it. And, yes, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Elijah, who's on the horn?
We go to Tom.
Tom, what's up? Thanks for calling.
Hey, thanks a lot, Schmitty. I was just wanting to know, so far this year compared to so far last year, do you think the talent overall is maybe just a little bit higher than it was a year ago with Rhule going into his second year?
I think the talent level, Tom, is good. I think the experience level at a lot of spots is really good. And I think they've done a good job of coaching up. I think they've done a good job of developing. And you have a lot of options. And what we didn't know a year ago was some of that freshman talent, right? On the defensive line, the Lenharts, the Van Poppels, the Princewills of the world. We didn't know about those guys. We didn't know a ton about Singleton, and I thought he played really good football till he got dinged. I think we saw Luke Gifford play really high-level football. I think he's ready to explode. I think Polar Bear's ready to explode. Same with Robinson. And I expect a large step forward with the offensive line that was okay last year, but you have options if somebody isn't getting it done on the offensive line. You have some more depth there. So, yeah, and I think you're more talented clearly at quarterback with two more wideouts that have played some major college football. So overall, it's a giant leap in talent, but I think the experience factor is big as well.
And it kind of depends on your definition of talent here, because I look at like a guy in Tommy Hill. Is Tommy Hill more talented now than when he stepped on campus? It kind of depends on what your definition of talent is, but from a physical...
playing up to his ability.
Yes, I think the development is much better right now than it was whenever Matt Rhule stepped onto campus. He's gotten guys better. I mean, talent is a hard word to use because it can mean multiple different things, but I think, like, in terms of the talent they're bringing in recruiting-wise, I think it's a slight uptick from what we saw during the Frost years, but I think the development of that talent is much better, so it kind of depends on what you're asking in terms of talent.
Yeah, I was meaning the high school talent compared to a year ago coming in.
I think the talent level that's coming in is it meets the standard they want. They've got a plan, and then they'll get them up to that level if they have anything to say about it from a developmental standpoint. And that's really all you can ask. Can you squeeze as much out as a player? And as a coaching staff, you get that connection, and it could be some really good things.
All right, well, hey, thanks a lot.
Tom, good to talk to you. Thanks for the phone call. 489-1240. If you want to join the show, we have Brandon Kinnie coming up. He's with Millard North High School, of course, as a receivers coach, but Alliance Sports Trading. We'll get BK's thoughts on Mooberry in hour two. I'm excited to hear how his trip abroad was, and talk some ball with Michael Bruntz. And Mr. Bruntz with Husker 24/7 is back in the fold with us. Excited to hear from him in about 10 minutes. We'll take some more emails and more of your comments in the stream. Moonbot, good to have you in the stream. He is advocating to keep Hartzog at safety. Move him to corner if you need to later. And Mitch was nailed it with just can Hartzog settle at a spot and thrive. He played really well as a freshman at corner.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's hour two. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us on the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. He is back from abroad. Michael Bruntz joins us from Husker 24/7. At Michael Bruntz on Twitter. Bruntsy, thanks for a few minutes. How are we doing?
Not bad. How's it going, guys?
Good. We have missed you. How was we'll get to football in a moment, I promise, but any souvenirs from your trip over yonder?
I brought back a soccer jersey, a Kaiser Chiefs soccer jersey, some knickknacks and curios, which you would expect, but nothing too crazy. We're traveling with two kids, so it was like the space was at a premium. So not much room to pack things away.
Best thing you saw on the trip was what?
Two elephants doing an Oklahoma drill about 50 yards from us.
This fits well because early in the stream, Anonymous mentioned how him and his buddy they were leaving the 95 Orange Bowl. And at halftime of the 95 Orange Bowl, they had live elephants as part of the halftime show.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the elephants had to take one and
did.
Not small. And dude stepped in it apparently because it was dark where they were walking. Is right. So you coming full circle here with South African elephant Oklahoma drills is pretty cool.
There was that probably was a heck of a deal trying to get elephants through the neighborhood where the old Orange Bowl was in Miami. That probably wasn't an easy thing.
I Little Havana. I don't think it was.
Those aren't native to Little Havana, as far as I know.
No, they are not. And I just remember the halftime and Costas going, "Oh, we hope it's a clean field," Yeah. So you saw the Oklahoma drill. Which elephant won? The one wearing the scarlet and cream helmet, or the Oklahoma helmet?
The one that stayed lower. Yeah. It's always the answer.
Yeah, it was all about pad level. The third elephant was working the hose and making sure that it was nice and muddy, and yelling at him to run it again. So that's how it worked out. But no, it was cool. Saw a lot of things, and the last day was the safari type drive around, so that was pretty cool.
Good for you. Michael Bruntz with us from Nebraska 24/7 at Michael Bruntz on Twitter.
And it was 100%, I guess I shouldn't say 100% a leisure trip, but you weren't doing any work there. You weren't like Matt Rhule and going overseas to offer some international linemen with eligibility in 2024, were you?
I was not. I didn't see anybody that was offerable. I was following Nebraska baseball's run closely. I was doing some hiking when Gabe Swanson had his hit against Penn State, so that was kind of neat. But yeah, no work being done over there.
Good for you, Bruntsy. A lot going on in June, and you and BC and Schaaf do an amazing job with coverage. And what right now is your feel with Nebraska in this month, this recruiting cycle? You've got some big time targets out there. Raymond Ziebert, putting out there on Twitter that he no longer is going to take the official to Nebraska the 21st of June. Stanford, pretty well-known tight end school. Duke also. I know Alan True with 24/7 National tweeting that out. What's your reaction to that? And really, what's your feel with Nebraska with the in-state talent level? They try to keep and get as many as they can, but there's more numbers than ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think there's a concern in terms of, what it means for in-state recruiting. I mean, I think if anything, this staff has shown that they're going to start in Nebraska and build their class around Nebraska prospects. I mean, they've got, half of their class right now committed are Nebraska players. And, the tight end spot's an interesting one in terms of kind of who Nebraska's targeted and, the way that they've, kind of put themselves in a good position with a number of prospects. You'd like to see him make the visit, but at the same time, I mean, you're Nebraska. You've got Chase Lofton coming in for an official visit on June 21st. You just added a commitment and signed Carter Nelson last year. I mean, the one thing that I think has been pretty striking over the last couple of years, and just watching camps and being at camps and seeing the types of prospects that have come through and worked out at Nebraska, the number of 6'4", 6'5" kids that weigh about 230 pounds that can run really well. It's unbelievable, the number of tight end and defensive ends that are out there than what there used to be. So, Nebraska's in a good spot at the tight end spot. They've got Bear Tenney already in the class as well out of Utah. So, the kind of focus, I guess, of June is going to shift quite a bit coming into this weekend, where you have two massive official visit weekends coming up, and you're finishing up the on campus camps too. So that's kind of the ebb and flow of June, which has been very busy for Nebraska at this point.
Michael, can you explain the surge of these tight end types coming out of the Nebraska area, the 500-mile radius, with Carter Nelson and Thomas Fedoni, and last year you also had Ashton Murphy. I think he's going to be more of a defensive lineman. But like these guys that you're talking about, Eric Ingwerson, these 6'4" to 6'6" guys that can run. There's a boatload of them in the class of 2025 from the 500-mile radius as well. Can you explain this surge, or is it just happenstance?
I don't know. I don't know if there's something in the water. I don't know if it's, all of a sudden, offenses started to figure out in the NFL how you could use tight ends differently, and that's kind of trickled down a bit to, the high school level. I mean, I think the fact that you see more of those types of kids, working out in the off season, they're athletic, they're playing basketball. I mean, I think it's kind of all of those things. I don't know that there's necessarily, just one reason why, that's happening. But, I mean, you look at what Nebraska has kind of offered and done so far. I mean, on Sunday they had Cooper Terwilliger down from South Dakota. He's 2027 tight end who already has Nebraska and K-State offers and is going to be, a national type prospect. They had a kid in from Illinois named Gavin Mueller who's got double-digit scholarship offers, and he's never played a down of high school football, but he's a really good basketball player, 6'5", 6'6", and runs well. I mean, it's just so projectable with those guys. So I don't know if there's just one reason why, but you just kind of notice, the last couple classes, like Nebraska hasn't had spots for a lot of guys that in the past probably would have been easy takes for them. So maybe that bodes well for maybe the offense that Nebraska wants to run. But that's something I've noticed this weekend. It was just like one kid after another that you're like, wow, that's a kid that looks like he can play some football.
Michael Bruntz with us, Husker 24/7. Follow that at Nebraska 24/7. Can find Bruntsy on Twitter at Michael Bruntz. So what's your thought, your feel here on the quarterback situation in Lincoln? And I ask because of the postgraduate camp yesterday, Bruntsy, with Jalyn Gramstad is the Northwest Iowa talent, NAIA Player of the Year. I mean, guy's super talented. Looked like he impressed. Also, you've got Bryce Conover from Dodge City Community College. Couple of options there. Is this just an insurance policy? Is this more experience? What do you think of Nebraska potentially adding to the quarterback room?
Yeah, I mean, it's, with the post-grad camp, I mean, I think Nebraska just kind of looks at it as, we're going to invite a few guys in. We're going to see, who shows up, because that was the thing with Gramstad was he kind of came in on his own. I don't think Nebraska was really expecting him to, be who he was. And it's just, you get to kind of run guys through the paces, see where they can help you. I mean, I think the quarterback room, Nebraska took a quarterback last year at that camp, and Luke Longwall out of Iowa Western, and now he's, a walk-on backup. But a little bit more experience I don't think would be a bad thing in that room. Another guy there, if they can find the fit. But that's, they got James Williams out of that camp. And it's one of those things where I think Nebraska's looking for any edge they can possibly get. They, had some kids in that were, just recently graduated high school that were state track champions that, played some football that they wanted to take a look at. They made a preferred walk-on offer to a kid at Coffeyville Junior College today based on his performance at that camp. So they're just looking for ways to add talent, and, certainly, having somebody with the kind of accolades behind their name like Gramstad does, I mean, that catches your attention.
And fair to say that the type of guys that Nebraska is looking at and offering at these post-grad camps are guys that would be in danger if the NCAA in a couple of years does away with the walk-on nationwide, as well as a hard roster cap that's been in discussions among the NCAA for about a month now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of guys that would probably get squeezed out. I mean, and these are probably some of the guys that, have gotten squeezed out some places too, with the transfer portal and not having as many spots out there. I mean, you know, a lot of the guys that were there yesterday were junior college guys who, you know, were just trying to get a look. And it's, you know, not just Nebraska that's there. I mean, Midland had coaches there. Peru State was there. I mean, they were kind of running guys through drills. And, you know, from talking to those coaches, there's definitely a benefit there as well. So it's kind of a nice thing. I mean, it's good for the players that they get some coaching as well at a level that maybe they haven't gotten before. And you know, Nebraska maybe gets to find a needle in the haystack there. I mean, if you can find a James Williams every year, a guy that comes in and makes the impact that he did with the 3 sacks in 4 games, I mean, that's worth the price of doing business right there.
Michael Bruntz with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Bruntsy, when we talk about Nebraska and what the summer holds, are you? Is there a position group you're specifically bullish on? Is there one position group you're excited about covering or seeing what they become?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit on our podcast today that, you know, the defensive line and the narrative shift that's happened in the last calendar year is pretty remarkable. You know, I would say this time last year, a lot of people were still talking about, you know, who's going to be able to, you know, be the guys to be counted on there, because Nash Hutmaker wasn't Nash Hutmaker this time last year. And, you know, Ty Robinson was still a guy that kind of needed to prove it as an elite defensive lineman. You didn't even know what you had in Riley Van Poppel and you know, Jamari Butler and Cam Lenhart. And, you know, now that group can go 7 or 8 deep, and they still have guys that they consider X factors in that room, like Elijah Judy. So I don't know that there's probably a room on the roster right now that I would say is more of a strength than the defensive line. And I would have probably told you were crazy if you would have told me last year we'd be saying that right now. So I'm eager to see what that can be. I think what they should be able to do can also hopefully buy a little bit of time for that inside linebacker group to mature a little bit. But I mean, I think there's a lot to be excited about in that defensive line. And I mean, you guys know, anytime you're able to really control the lines, I mean, you've got a chance to be an okay football team.
Well, and if you believe in the old adage of iron sharpens iron, I think a high-level defensive line really means good things for your offensive line as well. Yeah, no, I mean, and then I think that's probably, you know, the defensive line's probably benefited from that as well. I mean, if you're, you know, Cam Lenhart and you're having to go up against Bryce Benhart every day in practice, a guy that started, you know, 4 or 5 years worth of games, I mean, there's definitely a benefit to that. And those Terrence Knighton and Donovan Rhule are not afraid to be a little competitive, have their guys getting after one another. So, yeah, I mean, that helps. I mean, I think on both sides of the ball, you have to feel okay about what Nebraska brings to the table with the lines.
Michael Bruntz with us, Husker 24/7 Sports, and at Michael Bruntz on Twitter. You pick one team, 30 seconds. Who is dogpiling in Omaha?
I'll go with Tennessee is the favorite, right? Like, yes. That's probably where they are. I mean, I think they're a pretty loaded team, so I would say I'll go there. It's been a chalky tournament so far for the most part, so continue that trend there. I'll personally probably rooting a little bit more for NC State or Kentucky, but I think Tennessee's really got that thing humming along pretty good. So I was even surprised that Evansville gave them as much of a series as they did in the Supers. So I'll go there. I'll go with the favorites, which I guess is kind of a Marge Simpson wuss bet, but I'm okay with that.
You do your wuss bet, Bruntsy, and celebrate. Thanks for the time. Yeah. We'll check in again. You take care.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Michael Bruntz with us. Brandon Kinnie going to join us next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Husker Standout, and part of and leader of Alliance Sports Training. Brandon Kinnie, also an assistant at Millard North. We love talking to BK at BKinnie84 on Twitter. BK, what do you know? Thanks for the time.
Of course, man. Of course. You know I'm always loving to be here with you guys, man, so I appreciate it every time.
Well, saw a Facebook post, and your air quote little guy is having a birthday today. So
yeah, man.
Can he whoop Pops in the driveway, one-on-one? That's what I got to know.
Not even close. I can't give him either. I can't give him nothing, man, at all until it's time.
So that's not a yes or a no.
You see how it's funny, man.
So that's the next question from BK, I think.
He doesn't want this interview to get saved for it to be years of motivation. That's what he doesn't want.
Yeah, no kidding.
I love it.
Well, what's been going on? Tell me about your summertime and what's been going on with Alliance Sports Training. How are things going here with Millard North as well?
Good, man. Just busy. Busy is good, though. We're super thankful for that. Just being able to have kids to pour into. We started our youth night through Alliance this summer. That was yesterday. So every Monday we'll have youth night at Emmanuel Fellowship Church. Every morning we've been going after, or getting after more so, with the coaching at Millard North and watching those guys get better. Evening time, we're doing speed sessions through Alliance, man. And we just grinding, man. I'm thankful for the purpose, man. That's what I am. Super, super thankful.
It's Brandon Kinnie with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, the news of the week this week has been Pierce Mooberry. He's a guy that's got to learn from you. You've got to coach him for a couple of years now. I want to get your thoughts on both the athlete and the person that Nebraska is getting in Pierce Mooberry.
Man, amazing. A-plus kid, man. A firm believer in Christ. Loves his teammates, is a great leader, and is always looking to get better, always asking questions, always just looking for small things to better his game. It's so funny because we were in the weight room last week, and I'm like, dude, what you going to do, man? He was like, well, it's out of Kansas State in Nebraska. I was like, well, you know what? I said, Kansas State isn't bad. They got a nice campus. I said, but dude, it's Nebraska, bro. Come on, man. So he laughed, and then when he committed, I seen him on Monday. I said, you knew the whole time, man. You could have told me. So we laughed about that a little bit too, man. But I'm excited, man. I just really hope and believe that with these boys around here that are making Nebraska, I feel like cool again to want to go down there and be homegrown kids. I think that'll help with the next batch of generation of kids that are coming up that are seeing that.
When it came to his recruiting process, how much of a I don't want to say coin flip, but how torn do you think he was? Because Kleiman's really got things rolling down at K-State. You know the Big 12. That's the league you were in before. A year in the Big 10, and then of course Nebraska's on that upward trend. It feels like, especially with Coach Rhule. So, was it a stressful process that you saw kind of up close to it as a coach?
No, not really. And like I said, I've been able to just see just a light, not as much, just now getting a position, not to, the beginning of January in a sense, but from his mental mindset, obviously, I feel like it was always like a Nebraska thing. He always talked about the coaches. He always loved his time down there. Obviously, his dad being one that had played down there and graduated too as well. But again, you don't want to throw that on all kids from Nebraska, right? You got to let them feel, let them figure it out, let them take their visits, and let them kind of distinguish what's what. But I mean, being biased, I always think it's Nebraska, right? I'm always like, come on, man, it's a no-brainer, man. It's in your backyard, it's down the street, man. So I'm just excited, man. I'm super excited to see it. And when I seen him Monday, I gave him a hug, and I said, congratulations. He said, I knew you'd be geeked about it. I said, you know I would, dude.
It's Brandon Kinnie with us here, talking a little Pierce Mooberry. And Brandon, whenever you look at Pierce, there's been a lot of discussion amongst the media on which side of the ball he's actually going to end up at in Nebraska. I mean, obviously he's been a great pass catcher and an end-line tight end at Millard North. Defensively, across a couple of years, I think he's played all three levels of the defense. He's that true athlete whenever you're listed as an athlete by the recruiting services. Do you have a spot that you think he fits in better than the others? Does he have a preferred spot? What's your take on where he ends up once he finally steps foot on campus?
Man, that's a good question. Man, Pierce is the kid is like, wherever you want me, Coach. I mean, like you said, he's a phenomenal athlete. So wherever he is put, he can flourish. You know what I mean? I'm biased, obviously, right, being a receiver coach. So I would love him seeing him catching touchdown passes in Memorial Stadium. But I think what's most important is him just wanting to better the team any way that he can. And I just love that trait about him.
Is there a different mindset that's required offensively or defensively? You hear it before that defense is kind of that attack and destroy mindset. Do you think that's true, or do you think that different mindsets can work on different sides of the ball?
Yeah, I think different mindsets. I think just being a dog at it, period, will help you on either side of it. And Pierce is that. Super physical kid, super fast, big and strong. When he gets his hands on you, you're going to feel it. You're going to know that he's grabbing you, he's pushing you, he's moving you to another place. So you'll be able to feel that with him. So, like, just being a dog and having that mentality, period, will be that. Caden Vermont is the same too, man. Just a great kid that is, like, willing to work and to grind at it, and to be a good leader in the same sense.
Brandon Kinnie is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio at BKitty84 on Twitter is where you follow him, Alliance Sports Training. On the defensive side, BK, he's a guy you've played against in your career. And what trait do you like best about Mooberry on the defensive side? Is it his speed? Is it his agility? Is it his size? What trait is good for him?
I think all of it. I think the coolest thing as well is, like, how well he moves in space. I think that's super impressive for a big kid like that. Like you said earlier, Elijah, he played safety last year, man. So, like, a kid that can go that's big, that long, that strong, can play safety, can play outside linebacker and do well at it, shows you how special he really is.
Let's talk wide receivers here, as Nebraska is going to be a little bit more pass-friendly, we presume, this 2024 season. A lot of options at quarterback, and that's a good thing for Nebraska. A lot of options at wide receiver, and some big-body guys through the portal. Jamal Banks. We talked, I think, this past year about Banks from Wake, and also Isaiah Nayor. With those guys coming in with their background, what can that do to the receiver room? And do you think it was necessary? Yeah, you want more talent for sure, but you also had some guys that really had to step up, and they did thrive, and I'm talking about Jalen Lloyd as true freshmen. Talk about that mesh between some older guys that came in and some young guys that are up and coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important of just building that camaraderie in that room. And understanding the next man up mentality, right? But also competing. You know, when I was there, Niles and then we're leaving out, but I was a JUCO transfer. They took me under their wings, but it was like it was competition. The same with those guys when I was there with Quincy Anunwa and Kenny Bale. It was like we're going to push each other to be better, but we're going to love one another. We're going to root on one another too as well. And whoever gets the bulk of those plays, whatever that it is, we go be here, helping them out, cheering them on, and do different things like that. So I think, like, that's the biggest thing that you want in the wide receiver room. Guys that just love each other and push each other well, but then also, like I said, compete at a high level or whatever it may be. For us, it was blocking, right? We took pride in blocking. So after the games, me, Niles, Mike McNeil, we were running around like, dude, how many pancakes you got? No, I got 2 cuts. You got this. So it's like when you building something like that and the culture in that, and you got something really special.
Brandon, we've seen some photos this week, one from Dylan Rhule of the receivers in that room getting some work in with both Dylan as well as Dayton, Heinrich. Is there a formula in your mind to becoming a quarterback's favorite target? How do you go about doing that?
I think that's a good question, too. That's funny. I mean, the biggest thing, right, is probably hanging around them the most outside of football. But one way is just doing extra things, right, being the guy that wants to do extra routes, whatever that may look like, staying after longer, meeting up on the weekends, whatever that is. But to me, it looks like that Dylan is bringing that into that room, too, as well, like, hey, let's go work. Let's go grind. Let's go do extra stuff. Let's go really put this on paper of what people feel and think about us, but also do back-end work to back that up. So I think it's super important too as well. Even if it's not like, I get having long practice and then long days and things like that. So maybe you just do the top of the route, you know what I mean? A couple steps into the route so you're not just gassing guys. But just being able to see that ball come off his hands, catching those balls, like understanding the firm, the grip, all of those things help when it comes down to it when you're on Saturdays or whatever day you may be playing during the season.
As a wide receiver, Brandon, I was a lineman growing up, so I never got any of this insight. As a wide receiver, do you know, is there a feeling that you get whenever a quarterback trusts you? Are there any signs that, like, hey, this quarterback behind center, he trusts me, maybe not more than his other receivers, but he trusts me enough?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when, like, I think you especially see it when it's like those plays where you're running around in the pocket and then you don't see anything but you just throw something up and it's like, hey, he's down there somewhere. I think that really shows the trust as well because it's like, hey, we've worked. I know what he's going to do. I know what he's going to be. He told me where he likes the ball, the radius. So it's like, I'm just going to throw it up and put it there. So I think that's when you can see it. But, again, building that camaraderie, building that understanding between each other is great. But you got to do that, like I said, in the offseason, those extra reps and different things like that.
So quarterbacks you had, Zach Lee and then Taylor Martinez, were you able to lobby for more grabs, or was it just a matter of getting open because you had your share of big games?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it was a share of just getting open, right? Like, we had guys that can really go that when I was there, and Niles, Mike, Karinsky, Gillian, all those guys, you had guys on the outside, big, fast, strong guys. So, whoever turn it was that game, we were all rooting on each other. You know what I'm saying? Whatever that it was, if it was big blocks, if it was big touchdown plays, it was the big catches that we needed. We loved each other well. So it didn't matter who got it, but we just wanted it to come from that room, right? I go back to thinking about the Texas game of, was that our last year? Was it? I think it was 2000 when we lost at home.
2010.
Yeah, when we lost at home. And then we came back Oklahoma State the next week, and we went off. The receivers had a great game, but the game before we dropped all those passes. The receiver, I had a big drop. Niles had a big drop. Like, it was a lot going on. And Coach Gilmore told us in that time, like, hey, man, like, you got to bite the bullet this week because the camera's going to be in your face. Things going to be talked about. So it felt good coming back that next week, having a huge game and just being like, yeah, we could play this position, right? We know what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Brandon Kinnie will wind down with him, of course, assistant at Millard North and Alliance Sports Trading. A lot of speed camps going on with Brandon Kinnie. And BK, did Bo ever wander over to the receiver area on the sideline, or was it just strictly the secondary he may unleash the fury?
No, we all done got it, man. We all done got it. It's not one side or the other. We all done got it, man. He done poked his head in there a whole lot of times.
Did any of those Bo tirades help you as a coach now? Do you try to stay away from those? What influence did Bo Pelini have on you as a coach?
Oh, he had a huge influence with me. Huge, because Bo was the guy, it was black or white. Like, you're either going to do it or you're not. If you're going to do it, okay, this is what comes with it. If you're not going to do it, then you're just going to stay there. It is what it is. So it's like understanding the players, being relatable to them understanding that you love them. That way you can push them a little bit. That way you can light a fire under them to make sure that they're giving it their all, because it's our responsibility to show up in a sense and make sure that we're prepared for the game. Not always don't go to the way that we want it to go, but you need that push in those moments where you may be doubting yourself. You may be questioning yourself. You need that. So Bo was great for me. Bo was absolutely amazing for me.
BK, when we talk about that some of those Nebraska squads you were on, I love your insight on Bo. I want to wrap with Ted Gilmore, and Ted. Yeah. Ted was a guy that was under Coach Barnett at Colorado, and he and Watson came over and then stayed with the transition from Callahan to Bo. And I just look at that receiver room with you and Quincy and Kenny, and you mentioned Niles, and quite a room. What type of personality was Ted? A lot of great recruiting in that Nebraska receiver room. A lot of late film as well.
Mm-hmm. He was a worker, man. He was a worker. He really broke the game down of the receiver of, like, really understanding the craft of it and being able to run routes and understanding angles and leverages and different things like that. You know, I really banked on a lot of my time in JUCO, a lot of time in high school, of just being super athletic, being, like, super gifted and being able to get away with a lot of different things. But really, like, become the technician at the receiver spot. You know what I mean? So he really gave us all that, and we got better. You know, a lot of the stuff that he taught me, I'm still using now with my receivers. So it like, Ted did a lot, and he did a lot of great things after Nebraska, too, as well, that goes to show how great of a coach and man that he was.
It's Brandon Kinnie.
Or that he is. I'm sorry. He's still here.
Brandon Kinnie's with us here. Brandon, before we get you out, tell us one more time about this Alliance Sports Training Camp that you got coming up at Memorial Stadium.
Yes, absolutely, man. July 21st from 12 to 3, 12 to 1 is registration. But it's a free youth and cheerleading camp, man. Come down, have a good time, mingle with other players that'll be there, learn some things, and just have a good time. That's the biggest thing that we want to promote is fellowship, loving on one another, and giving these kids the foundation to grow, but also hoping that we plant seeds, right, of, like, kids loving Nebraska and wanting to be there and play for that school, that amazing school.
Grades 3 through 8, and it's free. It's going to be at Memorial Stadium. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Brandon, you're going to be in Coach Rhule's ear saying, hey, you see that fourth grader over there? I think he deserves an offer.
Yeah, let's go Lane Kiffin. That's where we want to go.
You know it. You know it.
Brandon Kinnie. Find him with Alliance Sports Trading at BKitty84 on Twitter. BK, we'll talk again. Appreciate you much.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you, fellas.
Love spending time with Brandon Kinnie and doing great work with Alliance Sports Trading and Millard North, of course, and loves giving back to the community and kids, and just a great attitude, great dude. Love talking football with him. Interesting article here, and we know that the NFL trickles down to college, and we know that there's been some college that's trickled up to the NFL, but from a formation standpoint, and not to go football nerd on you, but you've got some common traits aside from the wins and the playoff performances. But Baltimore and Kansas City and Detroit and San Francisco, they ran quite a bit, 62%. The NFL ran all plays, 62% all plays in the NFL run out of 11 personnel. That's one running back, one tight end, 3 wide receivers. You're going to see more of that from Nebraska. You're going to see more three wide receiver formations. You're going to see a situation here with the Chiefs, 28%, the Lions, 20% ran, it's one back, 2 tight end formations. The league average was 19. And you have Baltimore and San Fran, they opted for 21 personnel. That's 2 backs, 1 tight end. But when you look at all of these conference finalists, they all had top 10 offenses. They all had a chance to spread out a defense. But, Elijah, they all had a tight end. I mean, you had Kelsey, of course. You had Kittle. You had Laporta.
Mark Andrews. And I know Mark Andrews came back from injury much of the season. But, I mean, that is kind of your mold, isn't it? I mean, if you're looking at what Nebraska's offense, I know there's been talk of San Francisco and positionless offense, totally get that. But if you have the ability in Nebraska right now, as we spend some time on the wide receivers this segment, you've got your deep guy in Lloyd. You've got your move the chains and be a beast in the middle of the field, but can also win deep in Banks.
And then you've got Nair, who can also take the top off, but also be a 2'6", 6'4" guys.
I mean, you look at Nair as a potential sideline jump ball type of guy.
Right, your athlete.
I think he would be what Brandon kind of alluded to as the F it, he's down there somewhere kind of guy.
Sure.
I think that'd be Nair on this team.
Right, and then you have a guy that's coming back hungry in IGC.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little taller at 6'1", and some of the younger prospects in Davon Hall and Keelan Smith you're excited about.
Let's not forget about Malachi.
No, I'm going to Malachi because I think he is a talent and a body type that you can use a lot of different ways along with that elite speed. So you've got options everywhere. Bonner is a guy that they really like flexing out now.
Well, and why he's really interesting to me is because you can go from having 2 back personnel to 1 back personnel with Bonner and his flexibility. I mean, you saw the touchdown catch in the spring game, that ability that he starts out to play as a fullback, and you know what, you're going to shift him out, and he's going to be playing slot wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Interesting way that stresses the defense, where it goes from a likely run formation to now a likely passing formation without any substitutions. You have your, it's 3rd and 2, and you see a fullback coming into the game, but that fullback shifts out wide, and they go gun.
It's going to be a pain in the you-know-what with your safety or your linebacker matchup.
Exactly. I think he's interesting if he can take some strides, because I think they had some plans from last year. I'm not 100% sure he was ready for what they had in store for him. If he can make some offseason strides, he's an interesting wild card for that offense as well. It doesn't get talked about very much.
You had Kittle and Kelsey each targeted 117 times last season. So you have that.
Well, everyone else in the Chiefs is going to drop it.
Possibly.
until the playoffs.
Possibly. But no, just some food for thought. Interesting story out of ESPN with just what formations you see and how mad scientist you could get with a quarterback that can put it on the wideouts. But the run game, always going to be key to burn that clock and body blow. We'll wind down a Tuesday next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down a Tuesday, we'll check in with Mike Babcock tomorrow, and Evan Bland also joins the show at Jock Doc, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Get the podcast, like and subscribe, and do the digital and audio portion of it. And can hear from Michael Bruntz, can hear from Mitch Sherman, can hear from Brandon Kinnie, former Husker Alliance Sports Training, and former Husker and Millard North coach. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at HVarsity Radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah, at Schmidt_radio for me. So plenty to get to. I know things will get a little more intense and interesting towards the end of the week with a major weekend of campers for Nebraska and official visit weekend. So it's kind of been a recruiting theme here this month. We've tried to cover it as much as possible and excited to do that again as the week progresses.
And do you know, would they be allowed to use the College World Series as a recruiting tool on a visit weekend? Are you allowed to take them up there and comp that and be like, hey, let's go see what Nebraska has to offer. Here's the greatest show on dirt.
Could, I guess.
But I'm not sure how valuable that would be to a football player.
I think what you're going to do is just spend time with them. Right?
Well, you could do that at a baseball game.
Right. You're gonna spend time with them, going to eat with them, going to have them learn how to make an omelet. And, I mean, it's cool. They do some really cool and unique things with Nebraska with their recruitment, but above all, it's here's our plan, here's what we see in you, here's where we like you. We want to make you as good of a ball player and student as possible, and away you go.
I think it would be big to see a kid's competitiveness, though, in terms of, like, can you take him to a baseball game? Can they take down 9 hot dogs and 9 beers in 9 innings?
That's your pitch in the name of strength and conditioning and nutrition. Let's see when is that on, or have you fulfilled that yet?
We are looking at the weekend of June 22nd and 23rd now, I believe, as I pull up the Salt Dog schedule. The College World Series, and obviously our time up there is throwing a wrench into things, but I think we're looking at a potential 105 Lincoln Salt Dogs versus Gary South Shore Railcats on June 23rd.
Okay, we are at Zipline Monday. And before that, we're at Zipline this Friday, 4 to 6. Zipline downtown location, just right across from the Chuck. Come by, say hi, get a cocktail or a beer. We kind of go back and forth between calling beer a cocktail. Me and my buddies do anyway.
Okay. Don't throw me into this.
It's not really a cocktail, but it's a beer, and it's an awesome beer from your friends at Zipline. So do that. We're proud, of course, Cornhead Lager fans, obviously, and just awesome and excited to be here. I think 3rd or 4th year in a row we're up at Zipline.
As long as I've been around.
Yeah, so that's what's happening.
So I think this would be 5th year in a row.
Is it 5?
Because it was even before me. It was back. I remember I had to produce whenever it was you and Colton going up to Zipline way back.
Yeah, so that might be 2018.
I think we're talking 5 straight years. So that'd be 5 years. 5 years at least, maybe 6.
Okay, because you didn't have. Yeah, it's total of 5, but we had the old 2020 issue.
Yeah, because summer of 19 was my
Michigan.
first summer. That was my first summer, and that's whenever you guys were up there, and
Yep.
I was chained to the studio.
Yeah, we're going to chain Will to the studio. Joey Chestnut, say it ain't so, out of the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest. He has signed a deal to be spokesperson for vegan Franks.
Good riddance.
You want a new champ?
You need a new champ, and if you're eating vegan hot dogs, get out of here.
Well, have you ever had one?
Yes, I have vegan. They're fine. I've eaten a lot of veggie burgers in my day.
They're not Nathan's.
No, they're not Nathan's.
Talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks for tuning in with Hail Varsity.